Welcome to the High Performance Herd. I'm fortunate today to have Ryan Getz, who is the CEO and managing partner of WGA Consulting Engineers, joining us to talk about his journey on building a high performing team. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it today. It's funny, kind of you say, what it does it take to build a high performing team? And it always feels like it's a process, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that that's where we start the call. Running my own companies and helping kind of 100 companies a year for the last 5 plus. I'm always left with like, well, better's better, and
Yeah. Yeah.
what would better look like, and how do we pursue it? And it's when I ran companies, I said, get used to the elusive carrot dangling in front of us. Like
Yeah.
it'll be there, and we'll run faster, we'll get better, and there'll still be room in front. And there's a reason to pause occasionally for perspective. There's the celebrate, congratulate, give praise, but there's also the, well, how do we start this all over again and what would better look like? So, um, in the spirit of that, Ryan, you and I have talked a while back, and I just want to kind of reground us in what drew you to leadership originally. What made you go, man, I want to build something bigger than myself, or I'm just drawn to leading teams. What kind of early in your life or mid stage or career? What's kind of yeah, this is when I first thought about leadership and knew I wanted to do it.
That's can be a long story, and I'll try to keep it super short. Grew up as a child working for my father, and he was an entrepreneur. Of course, went to college because I was supposed to go to college. My dad said be a civil engineer. And of course, I was 18 at the time. I guess I'll be a civil engineer. Go to school, have a great time, get my C's and get my A's in social studies. And I take my first job, and I couldn't believe how underwhelmed I was by the workforce. Worked for great companies, and this was back in 2001, 2002, and great organizations that just didn't feel like their main priority was growth of their employees and their organization. And maybe it could have been my perspective being way off working for my father and understanding kind of once you work in an entrepreneurial world, it kind of programs you not to fit into very many organizations. So really, it kind of started a 5 year journey because at 29, Stephen Ward and myself started Ward Getz and Associates. Now we call WGA Consulting Engineers at the age of 29, mainly from a place of just not finding that comfort working in the existing organizations that we had. Um, there could be a perspective that we wanted too much, right? Um, but you know what? We did. But we decided to take the risk and step out there and do our own thing. And but it never came from a place of leadership. It came from a place of, man, there's got to be something better.
Huh.
You know,
And, well, and I'm curious of that because prior to that, and we can go through kind of your work history prior, but clearly working in engineering field, hey, there's got to be something better. What was the, hey, we're pursuing something? What was in that? I'll put it in air quotes, better. What was the pursuit?
like I'll give an example. The last company I worked for, you know, mid-sized company, probably 50 to 80 employees, great run group. And once a year, I would get an annual review, and my boss, who was the owner, would come into my office, put on his glasses, read on a piece of paper what my 2.5% raise was for the year. And I walk out of my office and I wouldn't talk to him again for a whole nother year. Nothing wrong with how he handled it. I just felt like, man, again, growing up as an entrepreneur, working for my father, watching him deal with the strengths, the weaknesses, the struggles every day, and him crafting his own future. And here I am in an organization where I have to fit into square peg, round hole. And again, kind of once you figure out that, and this is now in hindsight, that I wanted to be an author of my life. I didn't want to be the person being told what to do. And just that overwhelming fire. And again, at 29, I didn't know any difference. At 29, Is this my next 30 years where I get 2 minutes with the boss and I'm not gonna take his job because I work for him?
Well, Ryan, in that, I'm sure many people hearing this or listening have, done their own thing, started it. And there's a misnomer in that, like, well, I got to lead it to write or be the author. And I'm like, man, I'm not sure that's true. Cause I could go back to the culture of the company you're at and go, but they could have given you opportunity to write your own story from the seat you were in.
Yeah,
You don't have to be the owner to write that story, I guess
and
is my.
that's the entrepreneur working for my father as a young child that I really realized I was probably always unemployable. Because once you see I mean, I have these crazy stories of working for my father where, I mean, drunks would show up, people would I mean, just it's in a completely place full of chaos, and watching and navigating that chaos became natural to me as a child, and so and the funny thing was, it was never about leadership at first, but I can get into leadership and where after a couple of years within WGA, we grew to 30 people really fast, and we stayed at we could not get through that threshold. And only through trial and error, talking to mentors, did I realize I was a limiting factor in growing the organization because I was not leading with leadership and integrity. I was leading with a desire to get clients to get money. And that's not leadership. That's running a small business that's using it for an ATM machine, and there's no greater purpose. And so in 2014, I went to Stephen and I realized that for us to really do something that's powerful, that can shape the world, that can create something that's new with value beyond financial value, it's going to take leadership. And that's why I get into like the first part of it and then the second part.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, Ryan, because I say always, in the last 5 to 10 years, lots of reflection on leadership, lots of, hey, I help organizations do this. Hey, I've run 3 companies, success, failure, everything in between. I tell people. Um, but the reflection I have on leadership is I need to inspire people to believe in something.
Yes.
Here in Bloomington, we've just lived through the national championship and Coach Signetti, and what you realize is he showed up to the losingest football team in the history of college football, yet he inspired people to believe that, no, we can win here. And I always go, well, that's the first half of leadership. I have to inspire people to believe in something, and then I need them to take action. I actually need to inspire them to do something toward it. If we follow the Signetti example, like, well, it's not good enough to get people to believe we can win. We actually have to do things that allow us to start to win. And
And
so,
then give them the tools and to
yeah,
arm them with their self awareness.
yeah. So, what you've described there is kind of this, well, I wanted people to believe something. And I'll even frame, you wanted yourself to believe something different. Like, hey, where I was at, I didn't feel like I could write my own thing. And, there's a start to this story, at least for me, Ryan, as you described it, that it's well, I believe that the company that I want to be part of can be more than what I was living. And so let me go try to build that. Let me go try to put something in place, even probably at the time without understanding what that was.
100%. And that's, you're exactly right. Like the first 7 years was literally, like, call it like running a fraternity house. You have a couple of young 30-year-old guys running around with a little bit of change in their pocket who have no idea that they have this really deep purpose. And then around 2014, I went through a pretty big life reflecting point where I realized that there's something much more meaning to life. My business partner Steven did too. And so it's almost like our guardian angel said, "Wake up." And once we realized that there was so much more to life than just running a business, that growing a purpose, growing an organization that can actually help people become better versions of themselves,
Yeah,
right?
well, and I think, Ryan, many of us that have led companies or have had this, I call it epiphany of there's more than just doing the work, that, it's why we exist, just cause. I mean, there's plenty of Simon Sinek's why. I mean, there's plenty of ways of describing it. But, I've always looked and said there's something in our past that created that, whether that was your dad or what you've experienced. Mine was my grandfather and my mom saying, "Hey, make your small corner of the world a better place."
Yeah.
And in that, I'm like, "Well, what does that mean for me?" And
No.
we searched that, and mine was finally like, well, I can help entrepreneur and business owners thrive. I can help them be really successful. And if I do that, and it sounds like you had something similar to that. Like, hey, we're having fun. And I know you went through a health scare. I recently went through a health scare, and it causes you to reflect. It causes you to go, well, why am I here? What am I doing? Our mortality, our why, we sharpen that. And I'm curious, as you kind of went through that with WGA, what kind of came out of it? Like, yeah, here's the why. Here's why we want to do this. Here's what we're about. Here's what we
Well,
want
and
people to believe.
and the hard thing is, like, when Steve and I each went through our own kind of health scare, right? Someone once told me, just because you go through a life-changing event doesn't mean anybody else did,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so everyone else is looking at you, so one of my mentors said, "Be patient. You 2 are the ones who change the rules of your organization. You're the one that ran it like a fraternity house. Now you don't want to, so it's like turning a big ship, right? Everyone internally has to believe what's going to change. Everyone externally believes what's going to change. And your ghosts or shadows are always going to follow you. That's what I always try to share with people that want to become leaders. The first step is take that first step, because
Yes.
people are always going to, they're all, when you show up, they're going to expect the chasing that for the last 10 years. And it
What?
doesn't stop. It doesn't, like,
Yeah.
because I know more about me at 48 than I know at 38. At 68, I'm going to know so much more about me then. And being a leader, in my belief, is getting to know yourself first.
Well, I mean, Ryan, it's funny because you look at that and go, hey, it's a moving a big ship. The way I think Simon Sinek talks about it, and I had a similar view, which is like the way I framed it in my own companies is I have to fuel the magnet every day that compels and repels. And early we're fueling one that says, hey, we're going to have fun here. We're going to be a little
Yeah.
chaotic. That was
Yeah.
the magnet.
Yeah.
And over time, you're like, yeah, that magnet's not serving me well.
No,
Like I'm
no, no.
attracting the wrong things. I'm repelling the wrong things.
Right
And
on.
so I have to do that. And Simon Sinek talks about that's like going to the gym. The first day we decide to fuel the magnet with something different, you go, man, this is hard. And you look in the mirror the next day and you're like, nothing's different. And he frames it like, you got to keep going to the gym. You got to keep fueling the magnet.
Yeah.
You got to keep doing here's the right stuff. And I'm curious over time what has become the essence of fueling the magnet at WGA as you start to think about, well, here's what we've gone to here's where we are. What has been I want people to believe this. Here's how I'm fueling the magnet. This is the essence of WGA and the culture we want. This is how we want people to think here.
So our culture is based on betterment of others and ourselves, right? And in our industry, private equity is getting deeper and deeper within our industry. And private equity tends to raise prices and lower quality and service for the employees, for the members, and the clients. And so currently, WGA is held by Stephen and I, closely held, or we still show up to work every day, and we get calls quite often to sell, and we have a huge runway left. And we have a desire to actually try to maintain the integrity of the engineering community. Not saying that private equity is bad, it just changes the focus from, the quality and integrity of the output to quality and integrity of the earnings first, and then output second. And so for us, it's about maintaining the engineering integrity in our community. We're probably one or two of the only regional civil engineering firms in Texas that are still privately held and closely held, where we still go to work every day. We're 120-ish employees across 5 locations in the state of Texas. Um, and we do all the services within general civil engineering. So we're quite diversified in public and private sectors. And so that's kind of been our internal moniker, because we get resumes from high performing individuals that want to join our team because they're trying to run away from private equity backed organizations. And by the way, I completely understand why some older engineers that ran out of runway had to sell to private equity, because they couldn't transition their leadership. That's a challenge that we're going to face probably in 10 or 15 years. And I'm constantly working on crafting our next level of gen just to see how they can show up.
Yeah, and is that I'll call it the classical succession planning. Who's the next generation? Who will run this? All right. And it becomes, I mean, for every organization that goes through scale, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Once you get through it, you start to go, okay, well, who are the future leaders? How do we do this? What is the, hey, if we're going to transition? And particularly, it's funny, I've witnessed a couple companies that have gone through three of these transitions of ownership, and they've done it brilliantly. They've done it in a way that says, hey, our culture has to persist. Hey, my ownership will be transferred to the next generation. How do we ensure that they're what we want? And they've now done it twice, where
That's awesome.
the
Hats
original
off.
kind of owners, yeah, and candidly, in a similar space to you guys, they're design build. They do kind of more construction focused, but it's not far from where you are, and they've literally same like, hey, there's a couple partners, and now there's three partners, and we've transitioned two to three, and now they're going from three to five. And they've looked and said our core values matter, what we want to be in the market matters, and that's helped them frame again, we'll call it this magnet of, well, who's right for us, who's not, and how do we use that to select, well, who are our next partners. and
Well,
and
and then you gotta transition the value as well, and that can be really difficult because in these organizations, especially when private equity moved in, it started raising the multiples of what these things are
and
worth, right?
they're insane,
And
right? They're
and
insane.
it's and I believe, and of course, this is not I'm not I just think it's unsustainable over time. Again, when prices go up and services go down, when I talk about services, I'm talking about services to the employees and the clients, and our engineering community needs to protect our integrity of our output and how we treat our engineers.
So Ryan, you've lived through what many entrepreneurs either struggle to or never get to, which is some level of scale. Hey, you
Yes.
started with you and a partner. You
Yeah.
you go off and do this. You even described like, well, yeah, it was kind of a have fun, live, we reflect, we change. If you think back to the, well, here's how we scaled. Here's how we went from something that was most likely, because it's typically that, a little chaotic to better. And I don't want to frame like, because I doubt you're like, we're perfect, but instead you're like, well, we have systems and process. We have repeatable ways of doing things. We have a process in the way in which we run the company. If you step back from that for a moment and share, here's how we did it and here's what we did, what would you tell people?
I would say the number one thing is reflect. Reflect, reflect, reflect. Because what we said from the beginning of this call, we're never there's no treasure at the end of this destination. It's a journey, right, of self-betterment, and it aligns with whether you're an engineer one out of school or the CEO in my spot, which I'm still trying to be a better CEO. I can tell you, I probably fall short of the CEO expectations every day, but I still have to challenge myself to become better and reflect. There was a time, so 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, I hired a COO, a professional COO that knows how to run an organization, and, I was in charge of the CEO and COO role before, and I had to go to Steven and said, "Steven, our top line is going up, but our bottom line is going down," and I'd realized I am well outside of my skis of knowing what I'm doing, and it's like I just explain it like this: you and I could fly a Cessna pretty easily with 40 hours of training. But to run a business with multiple locations, that's a process oriented like flying a 737. It takes training, it takes being a professional. And so we went and found our COO and he's killing it and really and you know, he's also very reflective. And at the same time, we're trying to drive forward, but also be open and receive feedback.
I know last time we talked, at least I think so, that you were early EOS or EOS light. Your COO kind of came in from private equity slash other places, I think, if I remember right. And
Yeah, we hired
brought,
him from private equity to come work for our organization. Yes.
yeah, and brought some more systemized approach. If you look at the essence of that, and I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs, including me, was like, well, I can, and I always call it create momentum. I can create momentum. I can get the organization moving. I can find early success. The challenge is I'm not good, and most entrepreneurs aren't at, well, what's the robust process that we have to put in place to make this thing run well? And I frame it as quality. Like, We can create momentum, but we're not great at creating quality. And that doesn't mean in individual moments we don't deliver quality. It's the systemic approach to
Yes.
quality that most entrepreneurs, rightly so, because they're used to creating momentum,
Yeah.
are not good at all the other. And so it sounds like you quickly found that and said, well, no, I need that person here. And even with your business partner, go, I'm not that person.
Yes. Well, when we ran EOS, once I realized that I had to shift gears in 2014 to become a leadership based organization with purpose driven at its center, the first thing I did was I created a leadership team with high trust. And I realized without high trust, every little error becomes a gigantic mountain of pain. With high trust, errors become this small thing because everyone trusts each other. It's like the best relationship with your spouse is one where trust is 100%, right? So then we started EOS, and as our top lines still kept going up, I found ourselves having a high trust team slowly meandering through decision making. So our momentum was slowing down. In hindsight, it was probably pretty good because it slowed down my errors that I was causing with the organization. And it allowed us to really see systematically that number one, you know, my team was full of engineers, not business operators. Number one. Even though at high trust, we can meander through EOS with a coach, which was awesome, the organization got way too large for us. And so, you know, that's when and of course, because I was able to measure, because EOS has our KPIs, it showed the signals pretty quick and being reflective and look at the EOS metrics. We're like, okay, this isn't working. We need to go somewhere else. And it's worked out great so far. I would give it a 10 out of 10 if I could over the last 18 months.
Yeah, awesome. So in that, what I heard is like, well, yeah, there's the next level scale. There's the next level of like, what's the experience? Cameron Harold, I saw him at a Vistage event, probably, yeah, it's probably 10 years ago now. And he had a great story. He was like, I think he was running either 1-800 Got Junk or College Painter Pro. And he's like, We're growing like crazy. We're all kind of ripping our hair out, going, we don't know what we're doing. And he goes, we went to hire a COO. And he said, we ended up hiring a lady that was at Starbucks. And she came in and she had the conversation with us. And he said it was funny. It was like, we're all like, this is chaotic and hectic. And she goes, you guys have such a cute little company. And it was the perspective of like, no, like I know what systems and process
Ugh.
and way to do this. And it's, there's always the next level of talent for organizations where we go, yeah, we need some of that here to guide us in a new way. And whether that's internal or external, it sounds like you've done both. As you frame where you guys are today, it sounds like really successful, but we'll transition a little and go, well, how are you spending your time now?
Mhm.
What's your focus?
So, so what I do, I spend most of my time internally on the organization. And across our senior practice leads and our senior leadership team, we have again high trust across the team. And they're great individuals, unbelievable leaders. And what I have found is leadership obviously needs to be pushed down. The most important leadership isn't at the leadership table. It's at the entry level table and the mid level table, because that's exactly where most of our work is done and most of our revenue shows up. And that's where people have the least amount of tools. I can remember my first 5 years of working at two different engineering companies. No one once bothered to tell me about simple little tools that I can do to make my time more effective, how to treat people, how I'm not the victim, how I am the author of my life. No one's having those conversations in these organizations below 35. So I spend most of my time internally on the organization, working with our members of our organization that are usually here for between 2 years and 5 years. And I just talk about, look, here are some simple tools that can make your life better. You know, um, Here are some struggles I've dealt with. And here's some things that I've done to make my life better because I want to be efficient. I want to make as much money as possible and I want to do a great job. And I think everyone can be on that side of the table.
Yeah, and Ryan, are you doing that formally, informally? I've heard. I mean, it's funny because I have a lot of uh, exposure to companies, and I see some that are like, "Well, yeah, here's our own university. We're taking 20 leaders through that." I was fortunate; I worked for some big companies, and Roche did this, and they would fly some of us all over the world. They had a whole process called venturing, where hey, well, you're going to go off and you're going to go to the London Business School and you're going to be trained to do these things. And then we're going to put you on projects and they're, global multinational projects where you're going to come back and get venture funds for ideas and, very, very structured. And then I've had others where it's like, no, we're having lunch and learns. How
Yeah.
are you approaching that?
So the way I'm doing it now is I'm actually funny. I'm building a structure where there's going to be an application process where people can apply to want to join, and it's really like what was it, from accidental to accomplished. And we're going to go through. And I always make this joke, like people say, "Well, how have you become so successful?" I was like, "I've been kicked in the butt so many times, and I've made so many mistakes that it's almost like I can pretty much tell." What's going to happen based on just me making as many steps, because I've been in this seat for 20 years and I'm 48. There's a lot of seat time there. And
Yeah.
so I'm coming up with my formal process in which I'll take applications, bring some people in, we'll do some self awareness, we'll talk about the different dynamics between different leadership styles, and we'll get into the things that are just really easy. So when people start to struggle, they'll have the knowledge, because the hard thing is when people are successful, they don't usually have the desire to go in and figure out what the issue is. And they tend to blame others for their success or lack of success. And so the whole point of this is for them to realize there's going to be a day when the weight of the world's going to be on your shoulders, and you're going to have to say, okay, this is up to me to make change because no one's going to do it for me.
And Ryan, I think that's awesome. So you're building something from the ground up inside your organization to start to move toward this, future leaders, succession. When you think about the short term, midterm, long term value, I don't think a lot of organizations do that and try to put like dollars on that because many will go, well, you're spending this time and energy. What's it worth? Have you thought about that, or you just go, no, inherently it's worth a lot?
You know what? It's worth it to me.
Yeah,
Right? It's
yeah.
it's it's the
Well,
thing it's the thing, and here's where I'm lucky, because being a closely held business and having my COO and his roles and responsibility and Steven and his roles and responsibility, it leaves a window open where I actually have a big chunk of my time to do what actually feeds me, and that's what feeds me. It's what makes me wanna get up, and if I can share stories which can help people suffer less and struggling with, I shared with a guy, sometimes if you just take Sunday night and prepare for 30 minutes, it makes your Monday like, hey, you know that. I know
right.
that.
Yeah.
Any old man knows that has been doing this for 20 years. And I told this young gentleman, I said, nobody ever wants to work on Sunday. There's not one person on earth. But we realize if we show up prepared, Monday's cake, people look up to us and it looks like we're walking around like bulletproof. That's leadership.
Well, and there's a couple things that have hit me in just the last few minutes of the conversation, and I'll share them with the audience because I think it's intriguing. Um, you started WGA what year?
2007.
And like when you look and go, "Hey, we've built something you're proud of and successful." What year?
Oh, 2013, 14.
Yeah. So, and it's not quite this, but I
Actually,
always
28, it was 2018 because I shifted in 2014 and it took me yeah,
so
sorry.
you've confirmed. I go, the world is full of 10-year overnight sensations. Like you look back, you go, man, I'm having a bunch of success all of a sudden. And you go, yeah, because it's 10 years of trial and error and learning to go, well, that doesn't work. And so I think as we age and mature, we like want to help short circuit that. And we want to pass on the knowledge, we want to educate. And so I think there's plenty of that we reflect and go, "Hey, I've lived it, I understand it." And people are always like, "Well, how do you do that?" And you're like, "Well, because I've done everything wrong for the 10 years prior. That's part of it."
Yeah, yeah,
2, when you talk about this succession planning, I'm always, this to me is like, well, there's 2 paths to great sports teams. That we buy up all the best athletes and hope we can get them to congeal, or we have an awesome farm team
yep.
and we develop from
It's always fun.
raw talent to something awesome. And if you look across sports teams and businesses are no different, I'm like, well, how have you arrived there? Do we have an open recruiting, go find the best talent, pay absurd amounts of money, and hope they fit our culture? Or do we take our culture and go, no, we need to infuse it with early talent. We need to invest in them. And to me, in my own organizations, I'm like, early on, you have to do the I need to
Yeah.
infuse with talent because
Yeah.
there's not enough.
100%.
But
100%.
quickly there, you're like, we got a lot of bright, smart people. Are we investing in world class development? And
And it really takes both, right?
yeah,
And that's why we always talk about our farm league. It's such an important thing. I have a lot of colleagues that run businesses and they always talk about their farm league. And you can go get, high paid hitmen, people that do a great job. They're out there. But there's nothing more than like just crafting and iron sharpens iron and creating these people that align with your values. And when people don't align with your values, bless them and let them go somewhere else where their values are aligned. And so, it's in our situation with, Ryan Venable, my COO, he's the pioneer and he's a driver. And it's like I'm kind of the connection guy. And and you ask me why I do that is because that's me being authentic.
so
And you can't give that people can smell authenticity and they can smell coherence.
yeah, I mean, there's a, I use with leaders all the time. What do you stand for? And then you have to stand for it. I go, the reason if you don't, everyone that knows you says, well, what's up with Ryan? Like this used to be important to him. This used to be what he espoused. This is the things that I've seen from him in the past. And as soon as it's inconsistent, everyone smells it. Um, there was something that you said there, kind of in, hey, we got the farm team, we're building it, we're doing it, we're investing. Um, as you think about kind of the early days, where now you're building this, now you're focused, now you're fueling the magnet. If you look kind of in the early days, what were the warning signs? And you've talked about it, but I'm curious just so people can understand, hey, it feels this way for you, where you're like, yeah, what we're building is not right, that the current approach wasn't yielding what you wanted. What was kind of the, I'll call it wake up, and you had your own health scare, but what was about the organization that you're like, yeah, this isn't what we want? And often it's either like core values, it's the vision of what we want to become, but often it's just like, yeah, this, I'm not proud of this, and here's what I want to be proud of. I'm curious.
I remember after having my kind of health scare in 2013 and 14, and I came back and got involved. I took some time off for some personal reflection time, and I came back to the office and I realized that half of the people in the organization were just kind of sitting around doing nothing, and and nothing personally with them at all. I just realized that you know our business had become a place where people are going nowhere, nowhere. They're just sitting and they're getting a paycheck. And there's a responsibility on my shoulders and Steven's shoulders and Ryan's shoulders to create an organization that can help people grow, right? Part of iron sharpening iron is getting them to grow and to get paid more and get promotions. And have this belief that everyone only has so much time on earth. What are you doing with that time to improve yourself, your family, your kids, your spouse, your parents, your sisters, your brothers? We all have a responsibility to help to improve the people around us. And my organization, Steve's organization, back in 2013, 2014, was doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's well described in kind of a fixed or a growth mindset. Like, hey, I'm destined to live the life I'm living, or no, it could be better. How do I take control? And clearly, you went through that epiphany. It's well
And
described.
you
Also,
are, and like I always say this, the organization matches the quality of your insides.
yeah, awesome.
100%. And I've lived through the dark side of it, and I'm living through the light side of it. And it's not a finger or a judgment of anybody else. The organization and people around me always matched who I was, and I didn't want to be responsible for people that didn't have growth or a mindset of creating betterment around them.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah. And Ryan, if today at WGA you said, "Here's what I want people to believe. Here's what we're headed toward. Here's what we're about," how would you describe it?
Well, man, who are we today? I mean, today we're a group of individuals trying to build great teams and create betterment out of each other by challenging each other. And, we have quarterly review process where everyone gets to communicate both ways. Because I believe a full-time job, full-time leadership position is agreement between employee and employer. You know, where are we going? We can go wherever we want. We do not have growth goals. We have goals that our leadership expands with our growth. We actually turn away clients, we turn away employees because if our leadership is not in place, we don't go somewhere.
So talk more about that. So what does it look like forward looking? And I will often hear organizations say we don't have goals, and I go, you mean financial growth goals, or hey, we want to become the most trusted? There's usually something
Yeah.
that's part of this. We're inspiring people to believe in something. Like,
So for us, integrity is everything. Number one, right? Authenticity and following through with our leadership is number two, and passing that all the way through organization. So everyone's constantly growing. Right. And so, yeah, we want to grow financially. Who doesn't want to grow financially? Yes, we want to grow to new markets. Who doesn't want to grow to new markets? But we have two things. We're doing it self financed. So that's going to limit us a little bit. We have offers for private equity money all the time that we don't take. So we're doing it because we've made a promise to our organization that ownership is going to be closely held. Ownership closely held equals trust and integrity, right? And so with trust and integrity, our goal is to grow as much and create as much opportunity for everyone in the organization with trust and integrity with ownership and the members of the organization.
so Ryan, when I hear that, I go, likely WGA is trusted in the marketplace. That people look at you guys and go, hey, we choose WGA because we trust them. And that
Yes.
the way I always frame this, and I'll use Texas as an example. If they said, hey, for civil engineers, WGA is the most trusted in the state of Texas, I go, well, we don't then have to put financial goals out in front of us. We just need to maintain most trusted. I go, because if we do, the financial stuff will take care of itself. We will get the business we want. We will get the thing.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
it becomes hey, where are we headed? I always frame, and how do we want people to act and behave? And you've described an essence of this. If I said, is it formalized, known, and I always put in air quotes, published for all to know, would you say yes or go, man, that's still something we need to work on?
No, it's published somewhere in our documents that they know, and it's I could probably pick up a piece of paper and read that statement to you, and I'd rather just have this informal conversation about kind of where our values go. Yeah.
Ryan, and you answered it. Meaning, yeah, it's defined, it's known. Because some people, I'll frame it this way: it's published, meaning it's on the wall somewhere. We have it written down. Um, the second that I always go is, no, it's alive and well today. Like if you walk into our organization, you feel it, you will see it, you will witness it, you will hear our clients go, we trust the hell out of WGA. Hey, I would go anywhere that Bill, who has done this work for me for 5 years, goes.
And we still have work to do, but that's the internal energy that wells up in the organization, and that's a desire of betterment for that purpose. And you know, Stephen and I, a long time ago, talked about we didn't want to write it on the wall because we'd all worked at organizations where they had it written on the wall, and there's a butthead going around just not doing what the organization says. And I'm not saying we're perfect. Remember, like I said, it's about betterment every single day.
Yeah. So Ryan, I'll throw this out just for you in the audience. I always push organizations to go, we want to regularly talk about what it means and what it doesn't mean. So whatever the words would be on the wall, whether or not we have them on the wall or not, we go, well, here's what it means and here's what it doesn't mean. Because people will go, well, I was just telling the truth. I was just
Yeah.
being full of integrity. You're like, well, no, you
Yeah.
pissed off our best client and they're really angry because you told them the brutal truth. Like, could you have done it in a kinder way that builds trust?
Yes.
So there's always examples where you're like, yeah, we don't need to get locked into well, this is the core value. And I was just doing that. No, we have regular conversations of here's what it means. You're living it.
And we have our core values of accountability, respect, empowerment, attitude, effort, and efficiency. And the big one that's the hardest one is empowerment, because what is empowerment? It's the lifting up of others, but also holding them accountable at the same time. And it is one of I kind of wish I chose an easy one, but that's the most important thing is if people don't feel empowered, they go somewhere else because people and employees these days are looking more than for the financial return for their time. They're looking for growth from more than that of who they are as human beings.
Well, Ryan, it's funny because that my next question literally was, what's the hardest part about building a team that performs without you having to direct everything? And this is this empowerment. How do we get people to understand that we want them to own it, that we want them to come up with the next solution to the problem, that we want them to bring solutions, that we want them to challenge the organization? And you addressed it. I go, but why is that hard for organizations? What's your experience there? Why is it hard to get people to perform without giving them every task? What's behind
Well,
it? Your perspective.
so, and I can speak to engineers more importantly. Engineers, number one, highly technical, very much in the numbers, like to be perfectionists, right? You and I both know being a perfectionist actually hurts your career because I can tell you, but funny thing is, I believe a lot people can do a lot more, a lot better than I can at certain things. But engineers in general think if it's not perfect, then I can't give it away. And obviously, you can only do so much with your two hands. And the next stage of that is how do I get these five people to do what I need to do? And then, and obviously, when they first start it, they're going to do it at a lower quality. It's my job to help teach them. But that requires them to let go a little bit. And engineers in general hate letting go. So that gets in the way the most is a desire to be perfect, which is impossible for anyone to do. You know that, and I know that. But younger individuals value their work and purpose based on how perfect that little dot is.
Um, so I frame this in organizations. I do some personality assessment. I spend a lot of time with organizations, and I'm like, what I've found is half the planet drives momentum,
Mhm.
half the planet drives quality. And the best organizations understand both of that and go, we live in this healthy tension. And what it sounds like in organizations is the momentum drivers are like, well, we need to go do this next thing. We need to push forward. The quality people are like, we can't take on more until we figure out how to do this perfect. And the best organizations navigate that every day. Like it's
Yeah,
well, no, we're going to push a little harder. We're going to be a little uncomfortable and described in a bunch of different ways. But it's no, we live under a little stress of not quite perfect, but we're still growing.
yeah.
And
And we just recently rolled out COO's idea, obviously, that put people in two, a specialty and a secondary, a primary, secondary. One's technical, one's client, one's operations, and it really has been great for us. But and people are still kind of shifting around, getting comfortable to that. But it allows, your operational drivers to really go out there and drive, the technical operators to go out there and be highly technical. And then the people that really like spending time with clients focus on clients in a very logical way. So it's really helped our organization kind of bifurcate those different sectors.
awesome. As you think about the next couple years, so you've already come a long way. You're already doing that. But if you frame the next couple years and go, here's what we're going to need to do for next stage of growth, success, whatever the right word is. What's on your mind? Like, what's the next challenge in front of us?
We're going to have to control it. We're going to have to try to control it because we have opportunities left and right where other organizations they want us to buy them and come to this organization. And obviously you can only, walk, you can only walk and chew gum so fast. And sometimes your eyes get really big and you want to capture things, but you need to make sure you fully integrate before you take the next deal. And so that's really our biggest challenge is we have some great organizations that have great leaders that are either sunset or retiring, great product that we can acquire. And it's how do we do that while maintaining our integrity and quality and who we are? That's the biggest challenge.
And in that, Ryan, I heard, and I just want to clarify it, that you're looking at potential, we'll call it, we're buying companies, we're absorbing companies, we're doing JV, we're bringing in outsiders into the organization.
Yes, sir.
How do we maintain culture? How do we maintain the way we do it? All of those challenges.
At the same time of being open, right? So it's not a control like we're fear or you're not going to lose stuff. It's like being maintaining our core and our base where we came from, while at the same time being open to change.
Yeah,
Because
awesome.
you cannot operate tomorrow on yesterday's beliefs.
Got it. Yeah. So there's when I say control, I didn't mean it like you're
No, I
control.
said, yeah, I said,
Yeah,
yeah,
but no, I get what you're, and I get the subtlety of the way you framed it, which is No, we need to maintain our focus forward. Like we want to be this kind of organization. But what you find, and it's funny because one of my companies, we did a lot of acquisition for growth. We doubled the size of the company every year, and part of it was organic, and part of it was acquisition. And what you realized is like, well, that acquisition stuff's really hard, but we had to have forward looking. Here's what we want to become. Which for us, it was make it easier to live with chronic disease, and those who treat chronic disease make it easier. What you realize is like many times the acquired had a better way of doing it than we did. And we just had to be open.
100%.
We had to be open
100%.
to like, oh, that's an awesome way to think about this thing that we're doing wrong, in general.
And David, I can tell you the single most important trait in success is listening without judgment. Like, I'm not saying listen while you're coming up with an answer for why someone else is better or worse. It's completely listening with a quiet brain and being open to another person's idea and looking at it and saying, this is not for me, or it might be for me. And it has allowed this organization to just grow because it doesn't show very often in
Oh,
leaders.
if you could look forward and kind of wave magic wand and go, yeah, this is what I need from the leadership team, the business, what's the one thing that you would go, yeah, I would change this today?
Man, I've been thinking about that for a while because you say, what's the one thing, right? Um, I have found the biggest challenge in getting our skills trickled all the way through the organization. Because what happens is, I talked about that earlier. We have it up top. We get to our mid-level managers, but they get so busy because they're the ones fighting the war, right? And a lot of times they're in this kind of survival mode because they're having to deal with the clients that are angry. They're the ones lifting the heavy weights, and they're the one influencing down. And if I could wave a magic wand and take 15% of the leadership knowledge in your brain, David, in my brain, and ingrain it in the bottom two-thirds of the organization, that would be that would be the one thing I would ask for.
Yeah, awesome. And
That's why it's my responsibility now.
yeah, no, well, it becomes all the succession planning. How do we move the leadership team? And I used to talk about it. And there's a Drucker quote that I had everywhere would talk about it. And Drucker said only three things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. He then said everything else requires leadership. And so I used it all the time because we would point to friction, confusion, or underperformance and go, it's their fault. I go, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
It's our fault.
yeah,
It is a leadership challenge. It is what leaders are we putting in place? What resources do we have there? That if we witness friction, confusion, or underperformance, it's a leadership problem. And we as leaders need to strengthen other leaders. And you said iron sharpens iron. I'm like, no, we need to be captain of captains. As we grow and scale, we need to help people mature to this is the way we do it here. What's a better way of doing it? And collectively, we move that way. So that's an
yeah,
awesome answer. I really
yeah.
love it. Um, if we were 3 years from now and you said we were wildly successful, what would have happened?
Again, as a team goes, I like to be in a couple of states. We're doing some work in Canada now. And just to can what I would get okay, let me start over on that one because I'm kinda trying to figure out what that is. If we continued on our current pathway and I felt like the organization was still tightly glued, and we're in several states growing at the pace we're growing now, we're growing at probably a 25%, 20 to 25% per year, which I'm happy with that. Again, self-financed, there's no outside money. We're reinstalling all the cash coming to it. I would call that a win. I wouldn't call it a win if we were growing at 35% and everyone's hair's on fire, and we've lost our integrity has dropped or our leadership has kind of fallen off. Yeah, I wouldn't call that a success. And yeah, I think that's my answer. I'm going to stick with that
Awesome.
first one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. From a listener perspective, I always like to ask people that have lived through what you lived through and go, Yeah, I've had the push pull, I've had the struggle. I always go, there's this roller coaster we've all ridden if you've had this success. And in light of this high performing herd, how do I build teams that are more powerful? What's the one thing you would share about getting more from team? Like, as I reflect back on my own journey, I would go, well, here's what I've done to get teams to perform better. What's your kind of aha, if any?
I say it's two things: trust and listening.
Yeah. And just give the audience a little more. Trust
Well,
happens because
well,
like
trust
this.
happens because you pour into your leaders that are there, right? They have to feel, number one, safe that they can challenge you, because this isn't about what I know. This is about what the team knows. And we have to be able to have conflict in a healthy fashion. The foundation of that is trust. If there's no trust, conflict automatically happens in a place where everyone's scared to even say a word. And it happens is if I'm the leader, I'm probably most likely the driver of the group. So I'm going to have a red personality. So if I come in too strong, I'm going to shut down the introverts. And there's a lot of knowledge there. There's a lot of perspective there. And the reason why that's my number one is because that was how I used to sabotage myself the most until I did my extensive 360 review and my team showed me what they thought of me was opposite of what I thought. And it was it's a kind of an ego buster. And so, that's those are the things that I've had to really work on to try to make sure the team, not myself, gets the most out of operating together.
And then tell me more about listening. So I get the trust leads to healthy conflict. It's kind of the we'll call it five dysfunctions of team. Like we gotta have vulnerability, trust, so that we can have healthy conflict and commitment. If you think about the listening component, what would you share with the audience? Like, well, here's what I've done. Here's how I've gotten better. Here's what I realize about listening.
We have a world in which people all want to say something. And I had a mentor once tell me is like, there's a reason why God gave us two ears and one mouth. Between social media, email, all the information out there, it's like people want to say more so they feel more important. And I'll raise my hand as I used to come from one of those places and still find myself sometimes having to try to force myself to listen more. And in my position, like in your position, you're having to make decisions based on information. Ian, and the best company just makes, it's like driving a boat. You just barely turn the wheel, right? And you get the information from people around you. And you're the person that has to say yes to an item, no to an item, maybe, maybe tomorrow. And I always say, like, the best decision making comes from listening to everybody and making a decision that's the best at the highest probability that you think at that moment today. And that's going to be different again tomorrow. But to get that data, you have to listen and trust to your team. And sometimes my ego can tell me, I know what's best. Look what I've done. And so that's why it's an important trait for me, because it's something I used to not do as well as I do now. And I still need to work on it.
Well, that goes back to the better is better. I mean, all of us, no matter how successful we've been, there's still places, and you reference 360. I'm a huge advocate for leaders to go through that process and understand it. And it helps us understand, well, here's how you're perceived because we feel like we're being perceived one way. And then we go,
I have mine on the wall right behind this camera, and it does not. I can tell you, I was completely wrong with who I thought I was. So, and I
yeah.
laugh about it now because it's a huge opportunity to be like, man, I was really way off.
I think that's worth every leader endeavoring to understand how they're perceived more. Because we all have, I always use this story. Like we have a story swimming through our head that is true. And you're like, but everyone else has a story.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and what we find is like they're rarely the same story. And so this like, well, what is true? I'm like, well, all it is how we're perceived. And that's worth understanding. So um I appreciate it. If listeners want to know more about WGA or follow you, Ryan, where should they go?
I would say just go to my LinkedIn account. You can follow me there. I don't really publish any public stuff, and I kind of just mainly work on my team here. I think we can go to the website, www.wga-llc.com. But LinkedIn is probably easy. I get reached out all the time. I try to get back to most people there. Um, but again, my main goal is to work on the people here and stay here, and that's where I'm happiest. So
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time, Ryan. There was a ton of wisdom, openness. Clearly, you can feel the passion for what you do in your company, and that's always admired. So, thanks again for contributing and helping others, at least with a perspective. Um, Thank you.
thank you, Dave. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. It's been a great exercise, and I thank you.
You're very welcome.